On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfils disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfils remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfils 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
And I'm Mike Putchell.
Tonight's episode is entitled Tricks at the Trial. So the authors state, make no mistake about it, without the joint trial, you would not be holding this book in your hands right now. What do you think that the authors meant by that, Mike?
Well, that they firmly believe that the joint trial is really the main reason that they were convicted.
Trying the Monfils 6 together doomed each man's ability to forge their own defense. And citing taxpayer money and the emotional advantage for the Monfils family, Judge Bay Oregon denied the request for 6 trials. We talked a little bit in the past about the taxpayer money and kind of how D.A. Sakowski kind of snickered in the documentary that would be beyond human nature. That he knew that was just that was sort of nonsense. But what do you think about the emotional advantage for the Monfils family not having to go through 6 trials? Do you think that was justified?
Yeah, only slightly. I mean, you have to put in the other side of it too, though. I mean, there's still the families of the defendants. They are going through this too, and I think that he's conveniently kind of just sideswiping justice and getting to the truth for this emotional aspect of it. So I'm not real convinced by that argument, but I can see why he said it.
Yeah, I can see why he said it as well. But again, as you know, these are 6 people that are being charged with murder, so they should each have their day in court. Let's take a short listen to a clip talking about the security at the trial and some other things about this trial that took place.
The defendants in the Tom Monfils murder case sat together for this week's hearing, but they will probably fight to have separate trials.
When these 6 suspects make their way into court come Monday morning, it will be under very tight security. Security like we've never, ever seen before here in Brown County.
Most of the people coming to watch the trial are family members of the victim and the defendants. Most know the routine by now and plan on coming back throughout the next month.
How long it takes doesn't really matter, just so somebody pays for this.
Even high school students like Eileen Matusak are sitting in. Matusak is learning about the court system.
I just pick it up along the way, I guess, by watching and observing.
There are some here who don't have any legal interest in the case.
It's an unusual case. I mean, 6 men tried for one crime? It's unusual for Green Bay.
And for the first time in either the civil or criminal case, Tom Monfils' widow, Susan, showed up in court with her attorney, Bruce Bachhuber, but she rushed out of court saying she didn't want to talk. Neither did the 2 defendants out on bond, Mike Sakowski and Dale Baston.
Ask you how you think it's going so far?
No comment.
So one of the things that was mentioned in the clip, Mike, was this need for a lot of security. What do you think was meant by that?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that, I mean, we know that these people never demonstrated violence or any desire to act out. So the only thing I can think of is that this was like the prosecutor's way of like making it seem like they're more dangerous than they really are. Same reason why they had like the the SWAT team round them up and arrest them when they finally were arrested with the charges. I think it's all kind of theater just to make it seem like they're really bad people and we need to protect the public from them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you're probably right. Do you think that they were worried at all that the Monfils 6 might get attacked by people watching the trial? Just people, Green Bay citizens who were so angry over what they thought they had done.
Yeah, it could have been that too. I don't remember the footage specifically. Was there any indication that the public would be like that? Was there a lot of like public outrage and protests? I don't recall.
I don't remember that being the case, like going back to when I was sort of casually following the trial back around, in 1995. But I know it was said in a YouTube clip that I watched that someone had mentioned that when the Monfils 6 were released, as they sort of walked down the streets of Green Bay, they would kind of have to, watch out that someone might just run up and sort of, attack them for what they had done.
What do you mean when they were released, like just recently?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you saw that on a YouTube video?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
It's still talked about, this case in Green Bay to this day, very, very often. So,
Well, just a comment on that. That's because I just heard that for the first time. I don't remember you telling me that before, but that's really frustrating to hear because people have no right to do that because, first of all, they've served their time. It's done, in the eyes of the state, which is really all that we are looking at here. They've served their time and it's done. So the idea that there's people who would be still upset and going up to them saying and doing nasty things, that's just really disturbing to me because these people, whether people believe that they did it or not, they've paid their dues. So there's really no right for somebody to do that.
and the fact that they're all more or less old men at this point.
Yeah.
The fact that Sakowski pushed for a joint trial shows that he lacked faith in the evidence to try and convict each of the men separately. Kellner's testimony was 100% hearsay. He did not know any of it himself. Keith Kutzka had told him the story, or that's what he had said. Keith had told him the story of the Fox Den. Hearsay evidence is seldom allowed in a court of law, according to the authors. They also state that Kellner's testimony essentially was a version of the telephone game. Can you explain the telephone game, Mike?
Sure. So I never played it, but I know the gist of it. Somebody starts it off where you'll start a little story or kind of like a rumor type thing, and then you just go down the line. It's a group of like 6 people, and then each person whispers it into the ear of the other, and kind of as it goes from person to person, the story changes because people don't remember all the details, and it ends up being kind of funny because by the end of it, it's usually not remotely the same story as the original.
Yeah, I do remember being in a college class. Maybe it was a sociology class or something like that. That we did this as an experiment, and it did every time. It was vastly different by the end, without fail. And the authors also point out that some people intentionally do want to screw up the story, just to be humorous, and So there's various ways that it can what comes out the other end, it bears no resemblance to what started. Now, the Kellner testimony, this is a really important point. It was only supposed to apply to Keith Kutzka. It wasn't supposed to apply to the other 5 men. Judge Bay-Oregon instructed the jury on this point. However, as the authors point out, it's impossible to unring a bell. So we talked a little bit before we started recording that we both thought that this was sort of Sakowski's plan all along. This was his master plan. Can you say a little bit about that, Mike?
You mean as far as bringing evidence against everybody when it really should have just been against one?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that kind of in the same light of, I don't really think it was all just about kind of being kind to the families of Monfils. I think it was really just about, deep down, Sakowski knew that he had a tough case, and this joint trial was his way of getting around that. And that's always a big problem. I have always haven't been able to stand with a lot of trials is when the judge will kind of just ask them to disregard certain things that they've heard. I think that's really difficult to do. In fact, impossible to do for some people, to pretend that they didn't hear something and not let that weigh on their decision when it comes to a jury. So, yeah, I think that this was his plan all along, to have it be the group jointly on the trial, because he recognized that this was difficult. This was a hard case. He didn't have a lot of evidence.
Memento mori. Remember, you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite, as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. Mike, can you describe and differentiate our memorial films versus maybe a memorial film that you would have the option to purchase at a local funeral home?
Yeah, from what we've seen, that a lot of local funeral homes are offering is, along with kind of the package deal that they have, they do offer a video memorial, but it seems to be more like just a slideshow, like a photo montage, and then you can have the song of your choice put in there, and it can be kind of like a PowerPoint type thing, and that's okay if that's all people are looking for. We certainly do offer something like that too, with our photo montage option, going along with the seasons of the year. But again, like you said, you kind of, like anything, you get what you pay for, and the quality of these things really isn't certainly up to the level that we would provide. Even with the photo montage version that we offer, there's a lot more depth to it, and the music choices are far more vast. And one other thing that kind of sets us apart from these funeral videos is we kind of take it on a more personal level. I mean, these videos are AI generated, and this would be something that we're actually doing ourselves. And, we're putting, of course, a human element into it when we make these. It's not done by a bot. And that matters to a lot of people. I really do think that makes a difference. People want that human connection, especially in something like this. We're talking about people dying. I don't think they'd want it done by a machine. So there's that element as well. And then, I mean, again, we go even further with the personal touch. We've talked about Bula, your friend that passed. His video's like 35 minutes long, much more in depth, personalized. We get really down to the essence of his life, and you can't get that. You don't get that with these photo montages and these types of videos that we do that are kind of more semi-documentary shorts. This really entices somebody to view it who really didn't even know the deceased, and that gets their story out there. So you've got people who wouldn't even have known about this person viewing the videos at the gravesite, as we've discussed, the QR codes, and they're learning about the lives of this person, and that's what our videos do, much more in-depth and personalized than these funeral home offerings.
And we're back. Kellner told these authors he tried to set things straight with authorities on at least 50 occasions. At least one of these occasions took place in the DA's office. The authorities would have none of it. As the authors state, the Fox Den scenario was Winkler's invention. Why do you think that they were not heeding Kellner on these 50 occasions?
I think we kind of touched on that a little bit in the past, but basically once they got what they needed from him, that was it. They weren't interested in him anymore.
I think that's true as well. No trace evidence was ever found that an altercation had occurred between the number 7 and 9 machines, not even a microscopic DNA particle. Now, the DA claimed that Kutzka cleaned up the attack area with a high-pressure hose by calling Jeffrey Herman to the stand. Herman was a repulper / bale operator on the second floor of the mill. He had zero experience and zero knowledge of how the paper machines worked. He'd only seen workers performing their duties at a distance. There was no logical reason for the DA to call Herman to the stand and answer questions on proper paper machine procedures, especially cleanup. However, Herman had said during a police interview that he had in the past seen Kutzka spraying the floor. On this alone, Herman was presented as an expert. Now, this is something that I was thinking as I was reading this. Do you think that the other defense attorneys were aware that Herman didn't have really any experience or knowledge of the paper machines, as the authors point out?
I don't know. This chapter 2 had me thinking a lot about the defense attorneys, because there was a lot of moments in this story, this Herman story, and then the other ones that we'll talk about in a little bit, where I don't know if the defense attorneys spoke up. It doesn't seem like they did, but there were a lot of opportunities here for the defense attorneys to poke the holes through these witnesses.
Yeah, this makes me think that the authors, in their 7 years of research, that they were able to uncover this, and the jury, the defense lawyers at the trial just weren't aware of who this Herman was.
Well, let me just add that, though. There's always the opportunity for cross-examination. I would think that would have come up as question number 1. Like, tell me a bit about your background at the mill.
Yeah, I would have thought so as well. You would have, for sure. Herman had said he'd seen Kutzka doing cleanup at the dry end of paper machine 9. Now this, according to the authors, is more than 100 feet from the bubbler. But that tidbit never came out when Sakowski had Herman on the stand. the DA used Herman to cover for no evidence at the bubbler. So the big elephant in the room is the fact that there's no evidence of an attack that ever occurred at the bubbler. But, the DA and Winkler, they're saying this is where everything went down. So Kutzka must have cleaned it up, they say, with a high-pressure hose. Again, this would have just been minutes. He would have had just minutes to do this. The chance that you would get every little piece of DNA washed up seems dubious to me. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. But then we also talked back in the earlier episodes about the CSI component of the investigation. They didn't do a lot of that anyway. Like fingerprinting, look for DNA evidence. They didn't really secure the crime scene very well, so they didn't even really do any of that to begin with.
And there's videotape that proves that as well, that they didn't do that. Early on the morning of November 21st, that would have been when Monfils went missing, the product coming off of the 9 machine was being discarded because of the weight of the paper was fluctuating. Now, the DA speculated that Kutzka created this problem as a ruse to get instrumentation technicians Dale Bastian and Mike Johnson to the paper mill area so that they could help harass Monfils. However, Jerry Pulart, who was the third shift worker on that 9 machine the night before, also had the same issue. What did you think about the DA trying to get, Bastian and Mike Johnson tied into this due to Kutzka having a problem with this product coming off of the 9 machine?
Yeah, I think, again, that's kind of the typical way that he operated, where he has a bit of an issue that he has to deal with, so he calls in this Daniels, and Daniels kind of gives some information that could be interpreted a couple different ways, but again, Sakowski doesn't really look at or chooses to ignore Daniels's background, like as far as what he knows, how the job works. This is another example, though, where was the defense? Did they confront him on this? I don't know. Maybe they did, but I don't see anything about that.
So a little background on Dave Daniels. He had been working as the fourth hand on the 9 machine on the day of November 21st. So we talked in an earlier episode. You have your machine tender, who's the sort of the leader, the back tender, and then the third hand, and then the fourth hand is the lowest that you can get. So Daniels was the fourth hand, and he was a new employee with little experience. Yet Daniels was put on the stand as an expert, as a way to impeach the testimony of Kutzka, Bastian, and Johnson. Sakowski was asking specifically how long it would take to fix the paper machine, the problem they were having on the 9 machine that day. And the authors go on to state that putting Daniels on the stand was akin to a hospital janitor being put on stand to explain procedures a doctor should have used on a patient. The authors go on to state that the state's hidden agenda was to brand the defense as chronic liars, and it seemed to work, as after the trial, some of the jurors who talked to reporters mentioned that the reason that they convicted the Monfils 6 is that they believed that they had been lying. What did you think about that aspect of it, that the jurors thought that the Monfils 6 were contradicting themselves and lying?
Yeah, I think in some cases it may just be because these experts, in quotes, Barco, Herman, Daniels, it sounds like they were the first to testify. It sounds like they testified before the Monfils 6. I think it really just might be a matter of, because they got the first word, they kind of beat him to the punch. So even though what the Monfils 6 may have said made sense, I think maybe in the jurors' minds they figured, well, they're the ones on trial. They're on trial. They must be on trial for a reason. And we already heard from these experts, again, as Sakowski called them, they believed it.
What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that, your friends, relatives, and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
Yeah, the authors point out that, Barco, Herman, and Daniels, they knew more than what the jurors knew, and that's what the DA wanted. That's all Sakowski wanted, to appear as an expert, even though that they weren't. But the fact just that they knew more than the jurors is really all that they needed. A third example of highly questionable tactics occurred when Sakowski suggested Mike Pye was a liar with hearsay testimony. So they brought up a conversation that occurred in either May or June of 1993. So again, this trial is taking place in October of 95, so years before, where a mill worker thought he had heard another worker that Pye said something, and the authors point out that this was triple hearsay. So did these tricks affect the jury? The jury members would not respond to the author's request for an interview. What did you think about that? Why do you think they wouldn't respond?
It could be a couple reasons. It could be that they just want to leave it alone. They don't want to bring back the past. Or they may not want to acknowledge that things may have been done incorrectly.
Yeah, you got to think if you were on the jury and, years pass and it starts to look more and more like they were innocent, that how do you think that they must feel? Like, they must just feel awful that they ruined their lives like that. Even after Mike Pye was released from prison, jury member Kathy Hoffman told a reporter that she believed Mike Pye got the weight and got the rope that were found around Monfils' neck. Her belief came from Sakowski's closing argument, unsupported by the facts. Now, the documentary Beyond Human Nature, Alta Point, brings this up. This point that only Mike Sakowski, and it was actually Tom Miles, had access to this area of the mill where this weight could have been found. But the author's going to state that the weight found around Monfils' neck may have actually come from a locker next to the tissue chest. 5 days after the discovery of Monfils' body, mill worker Rick Damel told police that he had previously observed a weight in an old metal cabinet next to the tissue chest. He'd also said that it had gone missing following Monfils' death. The police did not follow up on Damel's observations. Mill workers were not questioned about that missing weight, and the cabinet was not dusted for fingerprints or checked for other evidence. Now that really struck me right there, that point that this cabinet that was right next to the tissue chest, that would probably be the most logical, area of where like Monfils got the weight, and they never dusted it for fingerprints. I mean, don't you think that that's sort of absurd?
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to earlier about how they talked about how Kutska power washed away the evidence, but there's an example right there of how the police weren't even really looking for any evidence.
Yeah, you'd think that if they would have found Monfils' fingerprints on that chest, that would have gone a long ways in clearing things up as to what happened. Another witness, James Sakowski, sorry if I mispronounced it. Sakowski was assigned to the yard crew. He was on the stand for just a few minutes. He testified to overhearing Dale Bastian and Michael Johnson talking to each other in the mill locker room. Sakowski said that he heard Johnson say in a very loud voice that he was not going to change his story for anyone. So during the trial then, D.A. Sakowski wanted the jury to think that Bastian was trying to get Johnson to alter what he was going to tell police to avoid suspicion. The authors point out, taken out of context, Johnson seems suspicious. But if you plugged into the reality of the situation, that actually underscores his honesty and his integrity, because Randy Winkler, was the subject of Bastian and Johnson's conversation. Johnson was explaining to Bastian that Winkler had recently grilled him and was trying to get him to alter what he had told police. Johnson was saying that he was not going to alter his words for Winkler. But the jury bought the idea that something had accidentally been blurted out. In reality, Johnson said he would never lie. And the authors point out that the jury cannot be blamed for this one. They were only given one way to view it. Again, though, what do you think that the defense lawyers sort of blew it here as well?
I'm not sure. I don't want to kind of call them out because I mean, we don't have a transcript of the court proceeding, but yeah, I mean, this is another time where they definitely could have had an argument back for this event of hearing him say that.
New episodes of the Monfils 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? We create individual and unique video-based obituaries that will allow anyone reading your local newspaper or visiting the gravesite to view the video and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com.